Raider Nation, good morning. It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, with a video around some smart, but let's be honest, some risky decisions that the Las Vegas Raiders made before their matchup in NFL Week 17 action against the New York Giants. Plus, I just wanted to talk about the Maxx Crosby situation that happened yesterday. I didn't have a lot of time. I'm here at my wife's family's house, and we had a lot of people over yesterday eating some cochinita pibil, eating some ponchada. Man, it was a really, really awesome night. But I did want to talk about some of the smart decisions that the Raiders have made really throughout the entire week, but there is some risk that is involved in those. On top of that, my message to Maxx Crosby and what the Maxx Crosby, let's call it, injury designation means, I think, for Pete Carroll and this entire coaching staff. Now, if you guys don't already know, I hope that you hit that subscribe button. I hope that you're always staying up to date with all things going on around the Raiders. We put out a video every single day this week. Try to keep you guys up to date with some of the shorts that ended up popping. I also will be live today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour before kickoff, for Texans up against the Chargers. We're going to be rooting for Houston. I'm going to be rooting for Jeremy Chuggs, and I'm going to be rooting for them to take down the Chargers because I want the Chargers to not have to play the Steelers at that 5 spot. I think whoever is the 5 seed in the AFC gives you a little bit easier chance of moving on when you look at some of the other division winners. That's just my personal opinion. So tonight, I think tonight is a big, big game for the Houston Texans, and we're going to be doing a hate watch party against the Chargers. So let's first go to the first smart decision that the Raiders had that, again, comes with a little bit of risk. You end up putting out Maxx Crosby, Kolton Miller, Brock Bowers, Jeremy Chinn. Those are 4 players that, let's face it, have battled injuries this season. Kolton Miller's been on IR. He's had to practice a few times, but the smart part about that is you're shutting those players down because you're focused on the future. And that's what this Raiders organization should be doing. You should be focusing on the future. And Maxx Crosby is somebody that obviously is tied to this organization. Kolton Miller is tied to this organization after getting an extension this offseason. Brock Bowers on that rookie contract. And Jeremy Chinn, he's going to be entering his final year with the Raiders after signing a 2-year deal. To me, what you're seeing right now is smart by the Raiders because not all organizations, I think, do what is always best for the organization in the long haul. And I'm not saying the Raiders are outright tanking. They're making decisions that I do think a lot of people are going to say, oh, man, it's a tank. But again, Kolton Miller, he's been on IR since week 4. Brock Bowers has battled a knee injury realistically since week 1. Jeremy Chinn has been on the injury report. And then, Maxx Crosby. I mean, we can't act like Maxx Crosby hasn't been on the injury report since literally week 5 of the NFL season. So the reason why it's smart, it's because those players not playing obviously helps you hopefully lose to the Giants, hopefully lose to the Chiefs, lock in that number 1 pick. The reason why it's risky, though, is because there are some NFL players that don't love not being able to go out there and compete. I think it's also a little bit risky because when you think about the offseason of what we're trying to bring in, there are always going to be players that look at these little types of details, and some guys are going to like it, some guys are not. But to me, it's a smart and risky decision, but I will stand that I think it's a smart decision. Also, I don't know what Chuck's going to be doing in the background. It's our final hours before we head home, so he's going to be enjoying it out here. All right, let's go to the next thing. So obviously, I had a lot of people asking me yesterday about the whole Maxx Crosby leaving the facility. If you didn't see, Jay Glazer reported Max left the facility. Pete Carroll confirmed it, and all I'll say is this. The conversation did start earlier in the week. I heard rumblings about a certain thing that could and could not happen. I did not know that the Raiders were going to shut down Maxx Crosby. I don't want to make it seem like that is something that I was told. But I was told earlier in the week, when I was live on Tuesday, I hinted at multiple times that I was going to do something around Maxx Crosby because I did hear by a source that the Raiders, people in that front office, some owners in that facility believe that shutting down Maxx Crosby was best for now and for the future because what they believe is if the Raiders beat the Giants or they beat the Chiefs, it actually is a higher risk that you're going to end up moving on from Maxx Crosby during the offseason because there is no real clear plan at quarterback. And let's face it, if you do try to go full-on rebuild, Maxx Crosby is the player with the most draft capital that you're going to get. So when I heard that Raiders ownership was considering shutting him down, it's why I decided to make the video that I did on Tuesday. You guys ended up seeing on Friday. If you didn't see it yet, it's going to be down in the comments. It's going to be in the description of today's show. Please go check it out. But I also want to be able to tip my cap here to Pete Carroll because he's not in a great situation right now. And he kind of shut down a lot of rumors that were going on yesterday where he's like, there's no issues with Max. There's no issues with the organization. And, Pete didn't have to do that because I really do think that Pete sees the writing on the wall. I think a lot of coaches inside of that room do truly see the writing on the wall of where this season's going to go and where it has gone and where it's going to be trending, in the offseason. But I also get Max Crosby being frustrated, right? And I know that these two games don't mean anything. I think Max, he said it himself, like he doesn't give a shit about the number one overall pick. And again, I don't blame players for having that mentality. But my question that I'm going to ask all y'all, and this is going to be the pinned comment here on today's show, was shutting down Maxx Crosby for the season smart or was it dumb? You let me know. I'm going to give you my answer, and I'm going to tell you why this is my answer coming up here after this YouTube ad break. The reason why it is smart, and this is my smart and risky move number 2. Reminder, today's show is titled, The Raiders Made Smart and Risky Decisions Before the Giants Game. To me, this is the smart and second risky decision because it's smart because you shut down Maxx Crosby for the rest of the season, which, again, helps you get that number one overall pick. But I also think, and I want to give some credit here to Ryan Holmes. I saw this tweet because I was thinking the exact same thing. I just, didn't do the homework on it. So credit Ryan Holmes on this one. He said, for all the outrage over shutting down Maxx Crosby, he has been on the injury report going back to week 5. Week 5 injury report. Since Thursday's practice of week 12, Crosby has been limited or did not participate in 12 of 17 practices. So, I don't think that people can just be like, oh, man, they're just shutting down Maxx Crosby and they're freaking the F out. Now, I think you got to look at the entire season, and I know that there's not a lot of people that are watching every single game, and I know there's not a lot of people watching every practice report, but I do think it's important, especially in a bad year, that you're staying up to date with all the things going on around the Raiders because if you're just now finding out that Max has been dealing with a knee injury, well, then I know you haven't been subscribed to the channel. And this has been a knee injury. It's not the same thing over and over, but he has dealt with knee injuries now, 3 straight seasons, and sometimes they just pile on a little bit. I mean, for me, again, I'm not a professional athlete, but I've had an ACL, I've had an MCL, I've had an LCL, I've torn my meniscus, and when you're getting some knee injuries, they have a funny tendency to keep on piling on, and at the end of the day, I want the healthiest version of Maxx Crosby. So again, man, we got to be able to sit back and go, well, Max has been on the injury report. So that, first off, is a smart move that you need to be able to do. The other reason, though, why I think it's smart is because we have to look at the long term, guys. I want Maxx Crosby to be a part of this organization for the long term, and it's why I asked the question yesterday, what's more important, beating the Giants and Chiefs or keeping Maxx Crosby? It's obviously keeping Maxx Crosby, but the other reason why I think it's a little bit risky now is because if you're the Raiders and you do beat the Giants, and if you do beat the Chiefs, I think that that's going to leave a bad taste in Crosby's mouth. I'm not going to sit up here and say that Max is going to want to be traded, that I have any inkling that Max wants to be dealt, because everybody that I've ever talked to around Crosby has always told me that he wants to be a Raider for life, right? But if you're Crosby and you're going, well, you put me down the final 2 games. I think as an athlete, you got to sit back and you got to go. There's going to be a time and day where you don't have the opportunity to put those cleats on, to put those shoulder pads on. Hell, man, if you told me I got another opportunity to put on my cleats, to put on my glove, not have the arm pain that I probably do every single day and go out there and pitch another 9 innings, bro, I would love to be able to do that, right? And I think every athlete knows that that day is going to come. So when you're held out of a game that you feel like that you can play in, you're probably going to feel some type of way. But I will say, there is a little bit more risk now involved for the Raiders, and I would say it's even more important that the Raiders lose to the Giants, and even more important that the Raiders lose to the Chiefs. And with the moves that the Raiders have made, I do feel a little bit more confident than I did earlier in the week that the Raiders can lose to the Giants. And, I watched that Chiefs-Broncos game in limited fashion. Again, this week was really about spending time with my wife and my wife's family and Chuck. Chuck's been an outdoor dog all week. He's been loving it, which I'm sure if anybody's followed me on IG, you've seen all the videos I've been posting. But he's eating grass right now, so if he throws up, I apologize. But there is now, I think, a little bit more risk because the Raiders have to lose those games. But if you watch that Chiefs and Broncos game, yeah, the Broncos to me are still, I think, the worst 13-win football team I believe I've ever seen. And Bo Nix has that ability to turn it on. But that Chiefs defense did play a lot better. Their offense isn't anything to ride home about, but at the same time, the way the Chiefs played the Broncos makes me still confident that the Raiders and Chiefs game is going to be a lot closer, because that Chiefs-Titans game that we saw in Week 16 made me hit the panic button like, holy crap, man. This team's going to lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. So I do feel better about the Raiders' chances of losing these finals two games, and I'm not saying they're going to go out there and outright tank, but you can clearly see that there are people above that are starting to make some things happen, and I just hope that the Raiders don't screw up their chances at the number one overall pick, because I'm worried if you screw up that number one overall pick chance, I think because you put Crosby down these final two games, there is a higher likelihood that he could be dealt. I'm not saying he's going to be traded, but let's just say, at the moment, like yesterday's video that I put out, I would have said that there is a 5% chance that Maxx Crosby could be traded this offseason. That's not a high probability. If the Raiders beat the Giants and they beat the Chiefs, I'll be honest, I think that number jumps up to almost 20%, which still is not a high number if we're talking about being traded or not, right? Think about percentages. If the Raiders now, because of what happened to Max, if that 5% that I was talking about, if you win one of those games, if you win both of those games, I just think that percentage jumps up a little bit, because Max is just, it's not going to leave a good taste in his mouth. And there's been some rumblings around that organization that, of course, Max isn't happy. But Max is also trying to look at his long-term future. The Raiders are also trying to look at their long-term future. And that's just the way that it goes sometimes. Let's go to the next smart move, but it is a little bit risky. And to me, this week is, and I've had so many people send me the video of South Park, where it's like the South Park episode, they're both trying to tank, they're both trying to lose, and it's kind of what it feels like, right? Like earlier in the week, the Raiders make their decisions to put down Brock Bowers, to put down Jeremy Chinn, ending their season. And then the Giants, they end up following it by putting out a multitude of their own moves. The Raiders on Friday, Maxx Crosby's out, Kolton Miller's out. The reason why I think that it's a smart move is because, again, I've said it 100 times already today, those guys not playing helps out the Raiders. The reason why it's risky, though, if you tip your hat too earlier in the week, the Giants can then also make a flurry of their moves, like DJ Davidson, defensive lineman. He's not going to be playing. Evan Neal, offensive line, not going to be playing. Tyler Nubin, safety, not going to be playing. Andrew Thomas, tackle, not going to be playing. Bo Collins, wide receiver, not going to be playing. Now, if you were to tell me, like, Mitch, how would you compare the Giants out list compared to the Raiders out list? The Raiders have more talent out compared to the Giants also. You got Jackson Dart. You got a young organization. And Dart, and, there's a lot of guys in that team. Like, to me, the number one reason why I'm hoping that the Giants win, and the number one thing that I'm going to be hanging my hat on, and I'll talk about it here in a moment when I get into prize picks, but it's like Jackson Dart, if he wants to be the New York Giants quarterback next season, he better win this football game. Because there's already some rumblings out there that the Giants could consider drafting a quarterback if they are at number one overall. I don't think that they do it, but if you're Jackson Dart and you want to be the face of that franchise and you want to make sure that whoever that new head coach is, that they're going to build around you, you better find a way to beat the Las Vegas Raiders tomorrow, or else you might not have a job. And that's just the cold, hard truth. When you're a new quarterback, when you got a new regime, they don't, just if they drafted you in round one the year before, that don't mean anything. And I want to be very clear on that, right? So I think when you talk about Jackson Dart, he's got to be able to go out, find a way to win this football game. And I know there's a lot of people that might disagree with that take, but to me, there's a lot more guys on that Giants team that have more to lose, and why it's important for them to figure out a way to get a win. So Jackson Dart, number one pick last year, 25 overall. If he wants to stay the quarterback of the Giants, I think he's got to be able to find a way to get a win. Coming up next here on the show, I will get into my message to Max Crosby, and it's going to be a little bit of rambling. I got a bunch of notes that I ended up writing down. Also, I think what it means for Pete Carroll, but I think a lot of y'all already know what the writing on the wall is. Before I get into that, though, today's show, sponsored by Prize Picks. To me, it's still the holiday season, and I still love this time of the year, man. I can't wait to go live later on today for Texans and Chargers. I had a beautiful time with my family here. We ate, oh my God, so much amazing food. But if you're like me, and I am the most fired up for Raiders football, for football in general, college football, like all this type of good stuff, it's happening right now. And I mean this, like this is the best time of the year to get started with Prize Picks. Is your fantasy football season over? If you want to still go more or less, it's really that simple. You just pick more or less on at least 2-player stats, and if you get your picks right, you can cash in. I know for my lineup that I did, I'm going to tell you guys the lineup that I have for Raiders and for the Giants, but also on Christmas, they did Picksmas, and Picksmas was Nikola Jokic it was 0.5 points. So obviously, that has already happened to me. So this is a $10 to pay, $84 lineup, and I did a 6-picks power play. So my lineup up against, again, I'm rooting for the Giants to beat the Raiders. If you want to get mad at me for that, you can. Hang on a second, I got to yell at Chuck. Yo, get down. Sorry, he's on like a crate, and he's not supposed to be over there. Sorry, Prize Picks. But if you look here at my Prize Picks lineup, I got Jackson Dart less than an interception. The Raiders and the Giants this season are both -5 in turnover differential, so I'm going to go less there on Dart. Then I went a lot of Goblin picks, which you can see the little green guy, that means Goblin. So 174.5 pass and rush yards combined for Jackson Dart. I took the more. Jackson Dart, 14.5 rushing yards. Took the more. Theo Johnson, the tight end from Penn State, took the more of 14.5 on his longest reception. And then Tyrone Tracy, 1.5 receptions. So if all that ends up happening, I turn $10 into 84, but they're all Goblin picks. So that means that Prize Picks believes that they're a little bit easier, so I don't get as big of a payout, but that gives me something to root for in this game. And when you look at, all the projections that these guys have had, I'm hoping that it ends up happening. It gives me something to root for on Raiders game day. So download the Prize Picks app today. Make sure that you use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. You're all right. You just know you're not supposed to be over there. So here's my message to Max Crosby. And Max, whether you see this or not, I hope that you always know, man, I always got your back. I've always had your back since day one. You've always been kind to me. Your family's always been kind to me. And I hope that you don't get upset for me putting my message out there because, I like to believe that people respect my opinion. So I'll always say this. Max always says that he wants to be a Raider for life. And the benching, the shutting down from the, standpoint of not being able to play these final 2 weeks with that knee injury, Max, it helps you do that. And I want you to understand that, and you do understand, and I know that there's an understanding here for Maxx Crosby. I think it's just one of those situations where it sucks, and it does suck, Max. It also sucks losing every single season and being in this situation that I feel like that we're in the past few years. And, sometimes you just got to change a little bit, and, sometimes change is needed. But if you want to be a Raider for life, I think that you got to look yourself in the mirror and go, me not playing against the Giants and Chiefs helps me be a Raider for life, because beating the Giants and Chiefs only increases the chances that Max is traded this offseason. The Raiders also told you earlier in the week that it could happen. And I know we always say no player should be above the shield. I think if you were to ask 100 Raiders fans who your favorite Raider is, I'd be shocked if not 90% people right now say number 98, and it's because the way that you handle yourself on and off the field. It's the definition of a Raider. You've always been a Raider. But, at the same time, we didn't hear anything about Kolton Miller, didn't hear anything about Jeremy Chinn, didn't hear anything about Brock Bowers. And I think when you wear that C on your chest, and when you've gotten some of the things that Maxx Crosby has gotten, and, I hear all the time, people go, oh, the Raiders don't deserve Maxx Crosby. At the same time, though, the Raiders have always done right by number 98. And they have always, and I mean always, made him the top priority in an offseason when, sometimes we should have been making the quarterback the higher the priority. And I don't think that many people should disagree with that. But, Max, at the same time, the Raiders have done right by you multiple times, right? 4-year deal, $98 million, first contract extension. This past year, 3-year, $106, with 2 years of that essentially fully guaranteed. But you also signed the contract, right? You also signed the contract, so I think for the whole situation to be handled, and again, from what I understand, based on who I talked to, Max was just frustrated yesterday. Like, I think it got blown up out of proportion on social media because that's what social media does. And people are like, oh my God, Max is unbelievably angry. I talked to one source yesterday, and it was like, essentially, Max was frustrated. It's the holiday season, and he wanted to go home. Like, you know, I think sometimes we've all had a day where at work or whatever we're dealing with in life where you're just like, man, like it hits you a little bit and you get frustrated and you don't feel like you can be the best version of yourself at work. Like, it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. And again, I'm just going off of something that I was told, but I don't know if that situation is nearly as bad as what people are saying it to be. But also at the same time, like, I do think Max has to sit back and go, well, this team did give me a brand new contract restructure, right? And your deal, Max, was structured to help this team win in 2026 and in 2027. And you not playing helps the Raiders be the best version of themselves in 2026 and in 2027. Because when you look at the front-loaded contract, because, again, when you get a deal like Maxx Crosby's, a lot of times it's back-loaded. Max's was front-loaded, and they front-loaded it so that way he can get some of that extra money, get some of those extra guarantees, and they were putting more money in his pocket. And they didn't have to do that, but the Raiders always, always, always want to do right by Maxx Crosby. And because if Max is going to front-load his contract, well, then you already agreed at that moment that you are on board with putting the Raiders in the best situation possible in 2026 and 2027. So, like, I'm a little bit disappointed that now all of a sudden it's an issue because, again, they told you at the beginning of the week that it was going to happen. I was also told by a source that the Raiders are still going to pay Maxx Crosby's per game bonus, which is $46,000 per game. So even if he's not playing, he's making $46,000 this week, and he's going to make $46,000 for the game roster bonus. Again, and that's a fraction of what he makes on a weekly basis. I'll tell you this, man, I would love to be able to make $46,000 and not have to do my job. And I know it's not your decision, and I understand that, but there's also a lot of people in this world that, $46,000, man. I mean, it's a lot of money. It is. And then also, you have to look at the way his contract is structured. And, I talked about this a little bit in my video that I put out yesterday, but the contract, Max's contract for 2027 becomes fully guaranteed on the third day of the new league year. So when the Raiders gave Max his contract extension in 2025, they guaranteed him. They already guaranteed him 2025 and 2026. Imagine you signing a contract and knowing no matter what, you're going to be paid for the next 2 years. That's a really good feeling. The third day of the new league year, this year, fully guarantees his contract for 2027. So, the Raiders are literally fully guaranteeing your deal, Max, just to make sure that you're happy and, satisfied with your deal. But I think it also is like they want you to be 100% healthy because if you get injured, that just makes it a little bit more complicated. So the Raiders are not only securing you for 2025, 2026, they're also trying to secure you for 2027, and your deal becomes fully guaranteed on that third day of the new league year, which I believe is like March 14th this upcoming season. But if I'm Tom Brady and I'm the leaders of that organization, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit disappointed in how Max handled that conversation because to me, you want your leader, you want 98, you want that guy that wears C on his chest to be on board with the plan. And y'all know I'm a man that loves a good plan. The Raiders have needed to be able to figure out a plan, and they've put a plan in place. And, Max didn't like it. But to me, we got to be able to sit up here and go, nobody's above the shield. And I hope Max, gets time. He sits down and he realizes that this is the plan that the Raiders are putting in place. And it's because they want him to be a member of this organization for the long haul. So if they want him to be a member of this organization for the long haul, that's the plan that they put in place. And if Max wants to be a Raider for life, he's got to be on board with that plan in place because all this organization has done is do right by Maxx Crosby year after year after year after year. And I know that they're not winning football games, but Max also signs the contract. And if I'm somebody that signs a contract, I think that, again, it takes two to tango. And I think as an adult, you sign that contract, you show up, and you do your job. And if your job is to not play these final 2 games, it sucks, but that's what the job is that needs to be done. And I'm just going to leave it like that because, again, I love Max. I think anybody that watches the show knows how much I care about Max. But at the same time, nobody's above the shield. The plan right now is put in place. I need you to buy into that plan. And if you're not willing to buy into that plan, well, then, yeah, we're going to have some other conversations probably in the offseason. So what I want to know from all of y'all, again, I've been rambling on this video. We're already 24 minutes in. If you could say anything to Maxx Crosby, what would you say? Say anything to him. If you could say anything to Maxx Crosby, you're going to hit with another YouTube ad break. Please let him know down below. All right, before I get out of here, I'm going to give you my smart and risky decision number 4 here. And the smart and risky decision is the Raiders are resting their players, to me, is a clear sign that this organization is going to be moving on from Pete Carroll. I've seen some people go, oh, well, they're already putting that out there, so Pete's going to end up keeping his job. Pete ain't keeping his job. There's been a lot of people around, the Raiders media room that's been trying to save some jobs. I saw a video the other day from somebody on Instagram saying like that Brandon Carroll has done a good job building this team, and it's laughable at this point. But they're going to try to put out some of that information. They're going to try to put out some of that information. Again, don't be stupid. Don't let it skew you. But to me, the Raiders clearly have a plan, and that plan is clearly, for the future. And I do wonder if they have a certain head coach in mind, and I'm going to be making a video later next week about some pretty good information that I've received, and you might know what I'm talking about if you watch the show every single day. If you don't, then, well, you might not. But I do think it's risky of what the Raiders did because, they're already telling the entire world, like, hey, man, we're going to be moving on from Pete. And this is your third head coach that you're going to be moving on from. And, it's another coaching staff that you're going to be moving on from. Why I get worried about that is because I believe that Pete and this coaching staff know they have nothing to lose. And when people have nothing to lose, they get ballsy. And when people got nothing to lose, I think teams are dangerous. And, to me, I already get worried about the Giants game. I'm already worried about the Chiefs game. A Pete Carroll team with nothing to lose, they might look like the way that they did up against the Houston Texans. And if they look the way they did against the Texans, they're probably going to beat the Giants. They're probably going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And that, to me, is a little bit of a risky move overall. So that's my fourth and final risky move. But again, I support every decision that the Raiders made. I hope every single player supports the decision that the Raiders made. And I hope everybody from Raider Nation supports it. At the end of the day, you're a grown adult. If you're a fan of this team, you've earned the right to root for whatever you want to root for. And for me, I stand true in that. If you want to root for the Raiders to beat the Giants, go ahead. I'm not going to tell you can't do it, right? You're a grown adult. At the same time, don't get mad at me for wanting the Raiders to lose these next 2 games, lock in the number 1 overall pick, and put ourselves in the best situation going forward, because I also feel like I have earned that right. So before I leave today, one more quick note here again. I mentioned it earlier in the video. I will be live later on today for Texans-Chargers. We're going to be going live an hour before kickoff. I'm going to be with my guy Reed, so make sure you're subscribed. Because of all this Maxx Crosby stuff that's been going on, I'm going to be giving away a signed Maxx Crosby football today. I know I said I would give one away on Tuesday. I'm still going to give away a Maxx Crosby helmet, signed Maxx Crosby helmet next Tuesday. But with all the Max stuff, let's put a little bit of joy and put some smiles on some people's faces today. So if you need a reason to watch Texans and Chargers, we're going to be giving away a signed Maxx Crosby football to hopefully spread a little bit more holiday cheer. So again, this video is titled The Raiders Made Smart But Risky Decisions. The smart and risky decisions are sitting your starters. Smart. The risk is the Giants also could do it. Also, the benching, the shutting down, whatever you want to call it for Max, it is smart. And I don't think it's nearly as outlandish as what people should think it is because, again, the dude's been on the injury report basically since week 5 and since week 12 out of 17 practices, he's been questionable or has not participated in. Max, you know that we love you. We want you to be a Raider for life. And I just hope that you know that this move that the Raiders made is to secure you to be a Raider for life. And it's literally that. It's not that they want to trade you. It's not that anybody should think that the Raiders want to move on from Max. The move of Max not playing against the Giants and Chiefs, I want to be very clear, is to have you be a Raider for life. And to me, that's a smart decision. Yeah, there's a little bit of risk involved because you're not happy at this current moment because you want to play. But I think deep down you know that it is the smartest decision for you to be a Raider for life. And I hope that you rock with us for a very, very long time. And I hope that everybody rocks with the Raiders Report for a very, very long time. I hope everybody had an amazing Christmas. Hopefully everyone out there is ready for a fun day today. My guy Chuck is absolutely cooked, but we're getting ready to pack up now. We got to head back to Dallas. I'll be at work here very shortly at Chat Sports. Hopefully y'all had a Merry, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you a little bit here on the Raiders Report. If you guys are even looking for more content around the silver and black, make sure you click the subscribe button right here. I'm always going to do my best to keep you up to date, even if I'm out in the middle of the woods. It's the gig, it's the job, but I take a lot of pride in doing this job. Shout out to everybody that wished me a Merry Christmas. If you want even more Raiders videos, these are going to be recommended by YouTube. I encourage you to go check them out.